And welcome to the 17th episode of Eye on Hong Kong. This is Harminder.
And I'm Lee.
And Key can't be with us because he's in line to buy an iPhone 6. All right, so... No, he'll be back next week. He's had a meeting he couldn't get out of.
He had a date with Jesus Christ's six-pack.
Well, but, you know, he's a very secretive person, so that might be true. We love you, Key. All right, so busy week. This is Hong Kong. It can never be down and out when it comes to politics. I guess we can start off with Sunday's, rally that the Pandems had with their silent march with a giant black cloth with some slogans on it. I mean, yeah, it's nice and all, but it really doesn't make a difference.
How many people were on the march?
They said 4,000. Cops said about 18 some change.
Which is the normal kind of ratio to what the police say to what the Pandems.
Let's say 2,500 just
2 to 1. Well, 2,500 is... It's a bit poxy, really, isn't it?
Well, I mean, forget the number, all right? Let's forget the number. What was the point? Another rally? Okay, yeah, it's great for the international press to get more photos. Maybe that's what it was really for.
What was the little boy under the big long black cloth? That was the one that hit the international news.
Oh, there you go. See? Perfect photo. I guess that's what it was for, because to be honest, it didn't really do anything. I had to go over my notes just to remember, oh, right, that happened on Sunday, unlike, July 1st or something where I do remember vividly what happened. This one was just like, oh, it was on the news, all right, thanks.
Yeah, I don't know either. Wasn't it supposed to be an official launch? Was it the official launch of something? Was it nominally the official launch or the official reminder that we're going to have an official launch of Occupy? Wasn't that the stated purpose?
Reading the post, it doesn't seem. I don't see anything like that. They just said it was a solemn march, and it could prove that they can march peacefully without causing chaos, which I don't think Occupy Central will really do. I think it's overblown, but I just think it was more of a PR stunt than anything, which is fine. You can have those once in a while, but if you have them too often, the message gets diluted.
Yes,
that's my point. Lee?
I agree. I mean, if they're going to do it every weekend, then people will just get pissed off because it's going to interfere with their going to their shopping malls and blah blah. When I didn't know about it until a few days before, I couldn't go because I had a visitor. Even if I had not had a visitor, I doubt whether I would have gone. You
wouldn't have gone in 33-degree heat just to walk silently?
Well, I did that on the 1st of July.
Exactly.
34 degrees heat.
Yeah.
And rain.
Everybody knows July 1st is the date for pro-democracy protests. And you can have it on more significant dates again, like October 1st, which is National Day of China, or the establishment of the PRC. Something like that, sure. But some random Sunday... I just think it was just wasted time, wasted effort, but made for great photos. Next topic is the 520 scholars that and researchers and administrators who actually came out against Beijing's what they call undemocratic framework for universal suffrage in 2017, and that's true. It totally is. But it's nice to see academics really voice out their disgust and their opposition to this reform package.
Now, these were academics and scholars based just in Hong Kong or anywhere?
Based in Hong Kong.
Based in Hong Kong.
20 tertiary institutions across the city. So it was, in my opinion, it's heartening to see more and more people outside of the pandemocrats take a stand. More people need to take a stand. Stop being that silent minority or majority, whatever, and take a stand. Be vocal about it because it is your future.
Do you think? I've often thought that the argument about pro-Beijing and Pandem, first of all, the way that we describe these groups is wrong. Okay, if you say pro-establishment, okay, means you're pro-Beijing.
Sure.
Okay. So therefore, if you're not pro-establishment, necessarily by using the word pro-establishment, anybody who's not pro-establishment is anti-establishment.
Sure.
And anti-establishment.
Well, no. They call moderates then.
Okay. Well, they. I don't think any of the Pandems, with maybe one or two exceptions, are anti-establishment in the sense that they are trying to bring down the whole place.
Yeah.
In fact, you
very
could
few.
argue that
Yeah.
they're actually trying to sustain the whole place because they're in favour of the rule of law, they're in favour of maintaining the separation of powers,
Right.
those sorts of things. So why would they be classed as being anti-establishment? I don't get these descriptions. I think these descriptions, the language that we use to describe groups is deliberately divisive and actually controversial. I wonder whether groups like the scholars and researchers, there is something of a intelligentsia versus bonehead type argument going on here. So if you look at the caliber of the people who go on these types of marches or these types, or write this type of article or write this type of opinion piece, compared with the Robert Chows of this world, there's a huge intellectual difference between the two groups. And it seems to be a running theme that the pan-democratic side has all the brains and the pro-Beijing side has all the I can't think the word to say without using the word fuck, so it has all the fuckwits. So is there an argument to use there that's saying that there's an intelligence case to be made for pan-democracy and the other side is losing the battle just because it doesn't have the brains?
Point taken, but I think the other like there is probably that quarter that are just brainless and just follow. They're just sheep. Bah, wherever they're led, they'll go. The other quarter of that half, I would say, are just people who just like the status quo. They're ready to retire, or they're almost finished with their job and they're about to retire. A lot of the older generation are the ones that are saying, stop making noise, stop, let me use this Beijing term, stop provoking quarrels and making trouble, all right?
Because they've got business interests, or
right.
because they've got a seat on the NPC?
Well, no, I mean, I'm talking about everyday people. I'm talking about everyday people that support the quote-unquote pro-establishment. Are usually, from what people I've spoken to, are usually just people who just don't like to see any type of, political trouble in a city. Because you look at other countries, some are just bogged down in just political infighting and nothing gets done. They'd rather have a rubber stamp kind of thing. Just, yeah, we're efficient and all that, but, it leads to bad stuff getting passed as well.
So it's a form of passive apathy.
Yes. Perfect. That's the perfect way to describe it. Some people are just like that. And yes, there are the other quarter that are just brainless. Because you see quotes like Andrew Lee, a former education minister and also a former head dean of Chinese U, saying things like, well, you show real determination and quit school. Forget about boycotting classes, quit school. Oh, and the people who are skipping school are like the Red Guards of the Cultural Revolution. And finally, what was his third quote? Oh, if I were a professor, it wouldn't affect me. I wouldn't care. It's a day off for me. Woohoo!
But that's not. That's actually quite a well-crafted argument, isn't it?
Really?
Well, it might sound crass, but it's not a dumb argument, is it? There's some thought that went in there. He actually thought about what was going on, and he's just taking the piss, isn't he?
With the Red Guard thing, they were following a cult of personality of Mao Zedong.
But he's being inflammatory, so he's not being apathetic about it. He's actually saying he's trying to use the power of argument and some sense of his brain to argue against it.
And he's also a current EXCO.
Current EXCO, former education minister. I mean, he should know better. I mean, we disagree with his opinions, but the way that his opinion is structured is not dumb. I would say. I have not heard. I mean, just look at the quality of some of the politicians, even from the pro-Beijing side, but they are one screw loose of a.
Well, no, yeah, exactly. They're saying stuff like, Well, the CCP was saying stuff like, "We are the largest pan-democratic party in Hong Kong." We're getting stuff. Yeah, we're getting stuff like, majority want this to pass. When SCMP poll said 48% said veto the damn thing, so that's certainly not the majority. That's barely half. It makes the Scottish referendum look, more decisive than this LegCo package. So, and of course maybe they're following that old adage of tell a lie enough times it'll become the truth, where they keep going, this is universal suffrage, this is universal suffrage, this is democracy, it's clearly not.
And the advertising campaign saying I've got to have it, I mean, how patronizing is that? How condescending is that?
Right. So you're insulting my intelligence by telling me that this is somehow real democracy.
And is it working? Do we know if that's working? Are there any signs that this campaign is working? Or is it just, as you say, a slow drip, 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 drip? If it goes on long enough, you eventually start believing it. Is that it?
I think it's just they can't lose face. Number one, they will never admit the truth, so they'll keep lying, right? What do they got to lose? They're not going to lose anything. They got Beijing behind them to support them all the way. And also, they know one way or another, either this passes or the status quo stays. Either way, they win. Beijing wins. Their guy is gonna be in there, whoever it is.
But the people trying to implement it here won't win. They'll come out really badly from this.
Oh, governance is going to be impossible. At a standstill.
So CY Long,
that's where
Rimsky Yun, Carrie Lam are all going to look like lame ducks after this. Incompetent.
Anybody after this who gets elected is going to be a lame duck because they're going to be considered illegitimate. They don't have the will of the people. They're voted in by some small elite. And that's where they're going to lose. But Beijing still wins. Who cares? Their guys are in there. Somebody else who might challenge them or say something against them is not. Again, that's why I say, where's Donald Trump? Because he's in the doghouse, clearly. And I mention this every show because I need to know what the hell's going on with that guy. He's quietly gone off while C.H. Tung is still, making rounds for the pro-establishment, trying to, saying this is universal suffrage, blah, blah, blah. I have a feeling he was very against certain policies of Beijing and didn't like the interference that was happening that we clearly see now with C.Y. Leung. And now they told him, here's your cushy retirement, now STFU. That's why I mention him every show.
But he's got his place on the NPC, right?
No, really. He's just like it's like the House of Lords. You don't really have any power. You're just there to talk shop, kind of thing, But that's just how it is, and we got to move on because we can go in circles with this thing, but.
I mean, the advertising campaign, the drip, drip, drip of the advertising campaign, apart from being patronising and spending our money on trying to convince us of something that clearly is a fraud, requires some kind of drip, drip, drip response. That who is going to fund a drip, drip response saying this is a fraud, this is a sham? Well, okay, but shouldn't there be? We can't just rely on Jimmy Lai, one person, to do this. If everybody, who's building up a fund to have a country drip drip campaign saying, do you want to choose between CY Long and Regina Ip? Do you want that choice to be the only choice that you've got?
I think
this is what do you want CY Long to claim legitimacy when he has none? Do you want Article 23 reimposed when he can claim that he's been elected by universal suffrage? Do you want these things? If people realise that they are the consequences of this, maybe they wake up. Who's going to fund that?
I think I have to give it to the media here. They give more time to the pandems for their comments than they do, other than the usual suspects of Wen Wei Po talking about China Daily. I mean, that's not even considered news. But when we talk about anything from SCMP to evening news on television and the radio, I hear more pandem than do pro-establishment. They both get their chance. But
because they can't speak English, most people.
Probably. But at least most of the EXCO members can. I'll give them that. But they do seem to have more airtime, so they don't really... Because I think deep down inside, the people who run these stations and stuff know that there's a bad deal if we accept this kind of crap known as Iranian-style democracy. But that's just me speaking off the record. I can't confirm that, but I when I look at the news, I see pandems having way more airtime and space than the other side. The other side gets it in, but I say 75-25. And then, of course, the government's lucky that in all the radio and TV licenses, they get a certain airtime for free for allowing the license. So they get free advertising.
Oh, okay. So the man's saying, I've got to have it.
Free advertising.
It's free advertising.
Yeah. It's part of your licensing requirement, that certain amount.
I watched that one. Yes, I remember watching that one too. Oh, yeah, I saw that one. What about the Wall Street Journal, the New York Times, and the finance and banking finance professionals for Occupy Central? Is that their title? Finance people who like Occupy Central.
Basically, yeah.
Yes.
I don't know their name exactly,
So
but yes.
they paid for the advertisement.
Yes, they
in the
did.
Wall Street Journal. So where did they get their money from?
They're rich.
Are these the chief executives of the banks and the
No,
finance
no, no.
houses?
This is just people who work in the industry. This is the middle management kind of thing. Middle to low. You know, it's not hard to get a bunch of donations and to get this advertising.
I'm curious as to why they talked about a Chairwoman-style crackdown. What do they know that we suspect but don't know? Are they just deliberately provoking?
Yes, they're deliberately, because the international community knows Tiananmen Square. It's that everybody knows what happened on June 4th, 1989. So why not provoke it to just to get some thought going? Is that we are fighting for a democracy. The end result could be Tiananmen Square all over again in Central, right? So it's smart. I think it was a smart way to get people thinking and to get people, because you open it and see Tiananmen Square, you're like, whoa, what?
Well, it was certainly designed to piss off the Chinese Communist Party.
Definitely.
No doubt about that. And do we know if it did? I don't
probably
remember
just
reading any feedback about it, but then I guess most of the feedback would have been in the countries where the Wall Street Journal and the New York Times are.
The whole world.
The whole world. Well, true.
Yeah. The whole world has those newspapers. Does anybody read them? That's different. But they definitely have the international reach, except in China. But most likely, I'm sure there were people that were not impressed by that advertising, But it's not like they don't have their own guns in the newspapers, because we had a op-ed in the Tory Telegraph, known as
Torygraph.
Is that the Telegraph?
It's still the Torygraph. It's still the Torygraph.
The Torygraph.
Yeah.
It was the op-ed was called "Let's Not Allow Hong Kong to Come Between Us." This was by Liu Xiaoming, the Chinese ambassador to the United Kingdom, and basically he was firing a shot against Chris Patten, former governor of Hong Kong, because his op-ed was saying, "Give Hong Kong genuine democracy. This violates the Sino-British agreement in 1984." And he said, well, it doesn't. Mind your own business. And by the way, why didn't the Brits introduce democracy in the 100-plus years of rule that you had over Hong Kong? So we're better than you, nah. Well, the thing he failed to mention is that multiple times China would not allow democracy in Hong Kong because they did not want a separate government on Chinese soil. They didn't want another entity. They didn't want another Taiwan. So anytime there were rumblings of greater democracy in Hong Kong, it was immediately shot down. It's been well documented in books that in the 1980s, after the Sino-British agreement was done, they wanted the legislature to have democracy, a lot of it, in 1988, but it kept getting delayed, caused by China, plus by the business elites of Hong Kong. The Chinese business elites, for that matter. 1949, after the World War II had ended, Governor Mark Young told the government in the UK, said we should introduce democracy in Hong Kong right away. Unfortunately, he became very ill and had to go back to England for treatment and just for his health. And the next governor came in, his name eludes me at the moment, was actually brought it out, thinking, well, why don't we implement this? But he went to his executive council of business elites. They said, hell no. We don't want this.
Because we'll have to give money to poor people.
And yeah, exactly. And also that they were, just like how Beijing says today, it'll just, provoke unnecessary problems for Hong Kong. And we don't want that. And the majority of Hong Kong people don't want it. That's the key. That's what they kept saying.
And what about the changes to LegCo what Patten himself implemented before he left that was immediately revoked on the 1st of July 1997?
The entire legislature was directly elected for 2 years.
And they got rid of that.
Right after July 1st, boom, dissolved.
That's a lie as well then, right? To say that there was no democracy. There was, and they
took
it away.
Chris Patten was a maverick. compared to all of our other governors that came in. He came in and it was like, well, forget David Wilson and Governor Eu, who were just like following the orders that they were given from London and Peking. They said he said, no, I'm going to introduce real democracy here, and of course he got shit for it. And right after that, and that's why the Chinese hate him, because he actually did the right thing. And now you're seeing him. He is the only politician of significance in the UK that is actually taking a significant stance on this, while the rest are just window dressing or not saying anything at all. Where's David Cameron? I haven't heard a peep out of him. So
he's too busy with Scotland.
Well, now he has the time to pen something. So.
On this particular point, don't forget that you've got until October the 14th to write to the Foreign Affairs Committee of the British Parliament with your views about the implementation of the basic Joint Declaration from 1984, the 30th anniversary. So
has it been violated?
Has it, and how it has been violated? Because it has been violated, I think most people would agree. And the scope is on the Foreign Affairs Committee website. The scope is a lot wider than just talking about the Joint Declaration. It covers things like the role of the British Council and things like that, so which is one of my own particular bugbears. So you must write. Please do.
And next topic is that Occupy Central seems to have a target date of when they're going to have their blockade in Central. That seems to be October 1st, which is a public holiday, and it's National Day of the PRC. The 2nd is also a holiday, so that's 2 days. That's basically how long it would take for the police to clear the areas. And another strategy they're going to have is not have one mass sit-in, but have multiple sit-ins in strategic intersections / junctions of Central, so they can't just tear gas one area and it's over. They have to spread out their resources just to get it cleaned up.
How many water cannon do they have?
I'm not worried about the water cannon. I'm worried about the LRADs. They have the sound weapons that the police have, where it emits sound and it's painful, very painful to the ears. They used it in the G20 meeting in Pittsburgh, and people were describing it as like ear-splitting headache. That is a weapon. That is a torture device.
And does that cause permanent damage to your hearing?
Of course, they say no. Neither does a taser, right? So, I mean, I hope they never deploy those as a complete last resort. Those should be for, like, armed terrorists, but not for peaceful protesters. That is a weapon.
And they have them?
They have them. They have LRADs, yeah. It's very that weapon freaks me out. It starts with because I look at the states as a bellwether. They went from just cops with tear gas to tasers to water cannons to LRADs, now armed war wagons and tanks on the street. And they call them, we need this. In little 4,000 people towns, they need this giant tank. It's for another reason, but I'm not going to get into that. But because the problem is when they see, they're doing it, so why don't we? I'm sure that's what they got the idea of the LRADs and G20. That's what they used. Because the G20 got out of hand here, too, when it happened in 2004. Yeah. And so I really hope they never bring those weapons out. And... October 1st, mark the date. That could be when Occupy Central happens.
Yep. Don't go shopping in Causeway Bay or Pacific Place.
But I will say...
Or IFC.
Well, I don't think they're open those days anyways, really, on public holidays. Nobody shops there then. Or it might just be a couple of hours.
Yeah.
But the thing is, if you're not participating in Occupy Central, go, bring a camera, record everything. Because what happened on July 2nd... was the cops told the journalists turn off your cameras, which that's illegal. You cannot tell the journalists to turn off their camera in public or if it's obstructing their work, which it wasn't. Same thing's going to happen probably that day. They're going to tell people to shut off their cameras. And do not shut off your camera. There is a great brochure / pamphlet that Keyboard Frontline / the Hong Kong Civil Liberties Union that Key is a part of released, showing your rights with your mobile phone and and all the rules of recording in public. So download that from HK CLU.
All right.
Next topic, Lee.
Tycoons, people with lots of money taking separate aeroplanes to go and have coffee with Xi Jinping. What does Xi Jinping... What's the purpose of this meeting? Forget the politics.
Basically, he's probably just going to sell why they came out with such a conservative framework.
So who asked whom for a meeting? The tycoons asked Xi Jinping?
No, other way around.
So Xi Jinping wants these rich people to go and talk to him about what? About what they think about the universal suffrage proposals?
Like I said, I think it's to sell them on the conservative framework, because I'm sure some of them were like, ooh, maybe this is a little too conservative. You guys could have been a little lenient or something. I don't know. I'm just guessing.
Was Jimmy Lai invited to go?
Jimmy Lai was one of the people not invited to go, unfortunately.
Funnily enough.
But people like Li Ka-shing, Lau Shaoqi, Michael Kaduri, who owns CLP, Henry Tang, he's quite the tycoon as well. Robin Chan, Bernard Chan, all these tycoons are going to go there and
tell Xi Jinping it's great, or tell him the truth?
Well, no, he's probably just going to talk about what he expects, and they're going to give their opinion, which is probably going to be completely skewed and a fraud, because they don't have the pulse. They're disconnected from the people on the street. These are not the right people to ask to come in, but they are the right people to ask if you have economic, if you want to keep the economy the same or keep growing without problems. These are the people you invite to see how can you keep our money laundering operation going? How can you keep our state-owned enterprises that are here profitable, like Civic? So I just think that's what it's going to be about.
So you think it's more about economic momentum in mainland China than it is about trying to put his ear to the ground about the real feeling?
Yes.
About.
Yeah.
Because why would they need to do that? I mean, they must be aware enough of what people really think, surely.
Absolutely.
So why would they need to fly all these people out in their private jets to go and meet Xi Jinping to talk about it?
No, they're not going to talk about what the people want. It's what they want. And he's going to make sure they know. And these people also have to stay in line and spread that message.
And a lot of these people are self-made billionaires because they were refugees from mainland China and the Communist Party.
Some of them.
Ironic, don't you think?
Very. Well, you don't bite the hand that feeds you, I guess, right? Because a lot of them have business interests now in China. A lot of business in China. And
Elsie
Leung.
Why can't she put a sock in it? Isn't it about time she retired?
She, or
better.
She thinks she's important.
Well, she was the Justice Minister, so she was the Rimsky-Yun of her time.
Yes.
Is she a barrister?
I'm not sure. I don't know her exact bio. All I know is she's former Justice Secretary. But what she said is that she wants China to be... No, sorry. She said that, we would have a wider choice of chief executive candidates if Hong Kong were a municipality of Hong Kong instead of a special administrative region. Basically, she just said what they really want to do to Hong Kong is turn it into just another Chinese city.
But even if you took her at her word, her logic is
flawed.
Well, it's perverse, isn't it? I mean, she's saying if Hong Kong were a municipality, then it would have a greater selection of possible candidates.
Which I don't understand how.
Well, they would all be CCP members, so how would that be a greater selection?
Well, you get more cyanide choices, right?
So you can get 10 CCP members rather than 2 or 3.
That's right. See? Choice. Isn't it wonderful?
But then they could have said you could have 10 CCP members with the proposal they put forward. But they limited it to 2 or 3 because more than 2 or 3 is far too confusing for people to understand.
We're too stupid to know that.
I just don't get that. From any angle, the logic is completely perverse.
It's awful. But what can you do? You're dealing with communists.
Why can't she just shut up and retire? I mean, go away, woman. How long, What more's the point? Why does the press even quote her? She's an irrelevance now.
She's kind of like the counterbalance to Anson Chan, I think.
But Anson Chan's got some brains. You might not support her, but she's got some brains and she speaks eloquently and she's intelligent. But this woman is just a pain in the arse. She keeps cropping up like a dead flea every now and again.
Well, basically, but I will say this. They started this free trade area in Shanghai. It was supposed to be the new Hong Kong.
Yes, and he's been fired. The chief executive's been fired.
That's right. It's completely a failure. That thing is, nobody cares. it was opened with this big fanfare. Oh yeah, this is our solution to Hong Kong. Nobody cares. Businesses, some of them have opened, but overall, it's nowhere near a success they thought it was going to be.
So you would have thought that the CCP would be saying, actually, stability and prosperity in Hong Kong is even more important than it was before because we can't get Shanghai to work because we've got no rule of law.
But what's more important to them? Power of the one-party state above all. So they don't care if it fails or not.
But if the whole economic edifice collapses, then so do they. This is why I don't get it. I don't get their own logic. If they're not concerned about the economic stability of Hong Kong, so their strategy is, okay, let's have Plan B. Plan B is Shanghai. Shanghai Plan B is not working, so Plan A is therefore even more important.
Right.
Okay. But at the same time, they give Plan A a good kicking,
right?
So that the chances of it surviving and prospering are more and more and more ropey as the years go by.
Right.
And they need economic stability to stay in power.
Right.
Then they've just kicked themselves in their own arses, and they're going to.
But they also know that the house of cards that is the Chinese economy is coming down, because that is why you see the police state ratcheting up, but using terrorism as the front, as a front to have it all there. They're also that's why Xi Jinping is on a purge of his party of people he can't trust. That's why suddenly he's telling everybody you can't have a salary of more than this if you're in a state-owned company, because they don't want people to say, "Hey, get those rich people." It's so unstable, the economy, that it could come down at any point. It's a correction. I'm not saying come down and that's the end of China. No, it's going to come down. But when it comes down, people get pissed. They lose their jobs. They lose their business. They have nothing to lose. So what do? You challenge the party. Overthrow the party. They don't want Hong Kong also to be that bastion of anti-party thought that it can drum up, saying, "Hey, I thought you said you were our one and only savior. You were the only reason we exist. Hey, wait a minute, you're all collapsed over there now." So they know what they're doing. It's cloak and dagger stuff, but they know what they're doing.
Well, I'm glad they do.
It's not good for us, though.
That's not immediately obvious to the outside world, but there you go.
There you go. Anyways, we got to end our first half here. Stick around. Second half, we have an interview with former legislator and current Civic Party Chairwoman, Audrey Eu. And welcome back to the second half of Eye on Hong Kong. And in studio we have Audrey Eu, the former legislator and current chairwoman of the Civic Party. You can go to our website, audreyu.hk, for more information. And Audrey, thank you for coming on the show.
It's great to be here.
So, you know what, I'll start with this. What was your initial reaction when you saw the MPC decision on the CE election, so-called political reform?
Election would be through the nominating committee, and then the nominating committee really wouldn't have any substantive changes. It would remain the same with the 4 basic subsectors, and also that to be nominated you would need more than half. You would need majority support, not only majority support, but more than half of the members of the nominating committee. So it was basically what it's described in the press as sort of shutting all 3 gates, completely shut.
And you were one of the guests invited to Shenzhen. You weren't a sitting legislator, but you were invited. And was this all that they discussed?
I think it was part of a show, I was one of the 300 who got invitation to attend. And I must say I really felt very, very depressed when I was in Samjan. One of the main reasons was that, there were all these other people there who was, who were from Hong Kong. And you would think that, they're fellow Hong Kongers. But when they spoke, they just felt so foreign to me. The sort of things they said about Hong Kong just isn't the Hong Kong I know, or isn't the Hong Kong I recognize.
Any example you could give?
Well, for example, there was this quite young-looking lady there who was an engineer, and she says, oh, well, of course nomination has to be through this nominating committee. And of course you cannot have civic nomination by the people, because even in the days when we were kids and when we were in school, the class representative would have been nominated by the teacher. And if it's nominated by the fellow students, and of course this would be somebody who's really a rather naughty student. And everybody found that what she said was so true and so amusing. Everybody laughed and clapped. And this young engineer actually said, oh, thank you very much. And she actually felt great, and everybody else felt great. And I said, look, I mean, is this Mars or something? I mean, or is this, Middle Ages? I mean, how can you be saying that nominating the chief executive is like choosing a class rep? And this analogy to your student days, I said, is this for real? And when people actually clapped and supported her on this, she actually thanked everybody for supporting her. And, all these people who spoke, I mean, they said, oh, I'm from this woman organization. And somebody said, I am the representative from this commercial association. And then there were other people who said, I represented this, what is the provincial association, or from a certain province, that kind of thing. And everybody was representing somebody else, and they were representing Hong Kong. And it just all felt so alien to me.
So they were there to represent Hong Kong, or
Yeah.
they were CCB plants or people from Hong Kong who
Oh,
support?
no, they definitely people from Hong Kong. I mean, it's just that's why I felt so bad about it.
What was their motivation for attending that meeting as well? Were they planted and told what to say?
No. I mean,
they tried to balance. The idea was to balance you.
No. How can you think that their idea was to balance me?
No, I didn't mean it that way.
I was in the very, very few minimalist minority. So it's not a question about balance. It's just. The feeling I got when I was sitting there was that this is the nominating committee. This is the replica of the nominating committee. And these people are going to fill the nominating committee. And they are going to nominate our chief executive candidate. And you can feel the sort of shivers going down your spine, because you say, these people just don't represent Hong Kong. They're not from the Hong Kong that I know. But yet, these are going to be people sitting in the nominating committee nominating our chief executive candidate.
And did they explain how these people were selected to attend that meeting? Did anybody say these people are here representing various sectors of blah blah? Was there any kind of explanation?
Well, there's, first of all, of course, there's no explanation. But, to a certain extent, when you look at the nominating committee, the composition of the previous election committee, then they are from people with vested interest, from those with the most conservative streak. They have the closest connection to Beijing and to the mainland. And these people are assured representation in the past in the election committee, and they're going to form our nominating committee.
Scary.
Depressing.
Absolutely scary. One theme that keeps coming up from the CCP is that this is a matter of national security.
Yeah.
Is that really a concern?
Well, this is a concern to Beijing, and this is the reason why they are so ultra-conservative and so bent on really refusing genuine universal suffrage, because they say it's a matter of national security. And that's why I think when people talk about pocketing it first and saying that, it can get better later, these obviously are lies, because when it comes down to question of national security, there is not going to be any change in the future, because national security to the mainland government is not the security of the country so much as the security of the national of the Communist Party.
Yes.
And therefore, when the slogan of "Love Hong Kong, Love the Country" is used, it actually is meant for loving the Communist Party.
Correct.
And not really for loving the country.
Right.
And so you can understand why this talk about universal suffrage is really about how to make sure that the Communist Party will, through an election, get the candidate that they have decided on before the election is even held.
Okay.
Do you think they're aware of the security implications of their own proposal, that things might get out of hand here in Hong Kong?
Oh,
because governance is going to become impossible.
Oh, well, they're not worried about that because they're not really worried about dissidents or dissenting opinions. In fact, when I was in Samjan at that so-called consultation, Li Fei from the MPC, he was chairing the meetings, used the word courageous or brave. I mean, what he said was, we will be very courageous and very brave and very resolute in facing any different views on this universal suffrage.
Well, with this so-called reform package, assuming we were given this package, but the one thing they changed was that the nominating committee threshold stayed at 1/8, would you have accepted that?
Well, what we've always said is that if the proposal eventually comply with the international standards, then this would go to a cyber voting, like the cyber voting we had on the 22nd of June.
Mm-hmm.
And if the majority of the Hong Kong people, in fact, do support it, then of course it's going to be very much of a guiding force to the Pan-Democrats. But we've always said that if the proposal eventually does not even meet the minimum, i.e. does not even comply with the international standard, i.e. there's going to be unreasonable restriction on the right to stand for election, then you don't even put it to an electronic voting. You just veto it. And this is exactly what has happened.
Because at least with a 1/8 nomination, you ran for the...
I didn't.
No, sorry. Alan Leung ran.
Alan Leung ran
and so
against Donald Tsang in 2008, I think.
I believe
yeah,
so.
Yeah.
And then Albert Ho ran in 2012.
against,
So the reason I would not want to accept this proposal is, even though a pan-Democrat has no chance in hell to actually win a CE election with the current framework, at least he'll be in the debates, injecting real issues. Where if we pass this proposal, all we would get is I've said this on the show many times. You get 3 flavors of cyanide. Which one do you want? Do you want apple? Do you want banana? Or do you want chocolate? Each one's going to kill you at the end, right? That's what we're getting. But at least a pan-Democrat is in there. At least one flavor, is the best, but you can't have it, is what they're saying. At least you would see, if it was somebody from the Civic Party, different issues, because I think it's the same chorus that's going to be up there.
I mean, you will not have the one man, one vote, but at least you get to be a candidate. I think that's what you're saying. I think now the government is already floating the sort of possibilities in the second consultation phase. And what they're saying is that, okay, you can decide now the nominating threshold, not for getting nominated, but for getting into the race of getting a nomination.
So they're letting us decide the 50% or lower?
No.
Committee?
The 50% is not going to change.
Oh, okay.
The committee is not going to change as much. I mean, I think what they have said so far on the second phase of consultation are as follows. 1, you can decide to cut the number of seats for the ag and fish, the agricultural fish, because they have 60 seats. Yes. They're overrepresented. So they say take out 30 and give 30 to the women representatives. And when you talk about women representatives, don't think that, it means grassroots women. No. It means the sort of women associations that are represented very often in the mainland consultations. You know those people that I'm talking about.
Right.
So DAB Mothers Association.
Something like that.
Okay.
And then the other area, they say, well, you can decide on the threshold for getting to be one of the candidates for nomination. When you race a horse, okay,
Yeah.
you think of a horse race.
Sure.
The horses have to get into the stalls first.
Right.
You get through the first gate into the stalls, and then when the bell goes and the race starts, then the stalls are open. The gates of the stalls are open, and the horses come running out. Right? So, that's why there are actually two gates.
All right.
So they've already closed, or they've already set their controls on the gate for the start of the race. They say that only 2 or 3 horses are allowed to run.
Right.
But what they say is, well, I now allow you to be consulted on how to get within the stalls. You see what I mean?
Yeah, I got it.
That's it. So you enter the gates,
right.
and then the next stage is exit the gates. So they've already decided on the threshold for exiting the gates. You have to get majority support from the nominating committee.
So they will allow you to go into the stalls where the door doesn't open.
That's right, exactly. Yeah, that's
Speaking of the consultation,
One thing that really annoys me about what's been happening with the consultation process, and I think the point isn't coming across very clearly in the press, is that the whole process itself was a sham, and has cost a huge amount of taxpayers' money and has wasted thousands of hours of civil servants' time compiling all of these submissions, producing a report. For what? If the answer was already known, because the answer does not replicate any of the proposals apart from
That's
the
right.
FTU.
No.
Not even the FTU.
Not even the FTU. It's even more conservative than the FTU.
So it's more conservative than all of the submissions that were
That's
made.
right,
So
exactly.
the whole idea of having a consultation process itself, which is going to be completely ignored, and then going through the sham of wasting huge amounts of money and spending vast numbers of civil servants' hours' time compiling a report. Who's paying for this, and why isn't this being called the sham that it is?
Well, we've always said it's a sham, but of course the government goes through the motion, goes through the pretense of consulting the people, and that's why the Pandemocrats have now said that they're going to boycott the second consultation, because having gone through the first sham consultation, you can imagine. I mean, they say you're going to be consulted on these, A, B, C, D, E, how many areas, and I've given you the sort of, and I didn't mention the other ones. For example, you will be consulted on what to do with casting a blank vote. And I said, why do you need to be consulted on
I think that makes it pretty clear what it means.
Well, they said this is one of the areas in which you'll be consulted.
Thank you.
How to count blank votes. They will be regarded as not having cast at all. So in other words, if, for example, the ultimate 2 candidates come out, and let's assume 1 million people cast blank votes and 500,000 people voted, then the winner just to need to get 301,000 votes.
For a simple majority.
Yeah, for a simple majority of the 500. And they will not count the 1 million because, I'm sorry, blank votes will not really count. It will be counted as an invalid ballot, basically.
But would they report the number of invalid ballots?
But I tell you, in every election,
They do.
They have to, because you will have to say how many people voted,
Right.
and then how many are valid votes.
Right.
So when you minus, when you get the difference between the 2 figures, then you know what are the invalid.
So let's say we
ballots.
quote unquote, pocket this reform package, and that happens, where we get you get the Pan-Democrats to say, go in there and throw in your blank vote, show your disgust with this sham of an election. Wouldn't that send a clear message to Beijing that, or they just wouldn't care? It's ignored.
Yeah,
it didn't happen.
You see, there is a Chinese saying that if you are invincible if you have no scruples. I mean, the lower you get,
that's very good.
Yeah.
Yeah, in Chinese, because you use the same word no or nothing before that. So if you have no scruples, then you have no fear. I mean, so you are invincible. If you have no scruples.
Do you think the consultation process and the consultation paper should be subject to a judicial review?
Well, speaking as a lawyer, I've always said that you should leave politics to politics and not really involve the court in politics, because judges are not really trained and to deal with politics, and it just. I mean, you don't want a repeat of the MPC decision overruling the
just
CFA,
going in a circle,
and it's worse if the judges don't rule in your favor because they're always sort of looking behind their shoulders or worried or whatever. So, I mean, even if you're in politics aside, I mean, even when in my ordinary practice as a lawyer, I don't encourage people to go to court. I always say, it's really the last resort. If you have no other choice, you can't settle it, you can't mediate, the other side is being terribly unreasonable, then, you're forced to go to court, because then at least you have to believe in something. And so you believe in justice and therefore you're forced to go to court. But, you don't want to really run the risk of losing. So, I mean, it's much worse when you are talking about anything to do with politics. You don't want to take a political problem to court and ask the judges to resolve a political problem.
I see your point. I just think that the judicial branch of the constitutional framework in Hong Kong is the only one that has complete credibility in the eyes of most people. So if the judiciary came out and said this is fraudulent, then that has an enormous impact in terms of exposing the fact that the consultation exercise was a sham.
Well, I think you've got the next best thing in a way, because Andrew Lee, you remember the former Chief Justice, wrote an article which is very, very rare, published in the Ming Pao, basically writing about his concerns and his worries about the white paper, one country, two system, and the fact that judges should not be called upon to be patriotic, because they're really masters to none, except to the law and to legal principles. I mean, you really can't really sort of push the point much further than that. And the current Chief Justice was also asked about this article, and he said his view is more or less like the former Chief Justice. So in a way, I mean, you can say, our judiciary has spoken without actually trying any particular case.
We hear a lot about foreign meddling. Which, I don't believe whatsoever, but this is what Beijing and a lot of the pro-establishment says, that the pan-democrats are puppets for foreign regimes. Of course, I don't buy that, but is that what really they're afraid of? Or are they really afraid of the liberal Western ideals that a lot of the pan-democrats... but to be honest, that is the most free system that we've had on this planet. So is that what they're really afraid of?
I mean, I think that they have two constant complaints. One is foreign governments trying to intermeddle into Hong Kong, and the other is that pan-democrats collude with foreign powers. I think you look at the two separately, because they're separate complaints. When they talk about intermeddling, for example, recently the British government said they are going to do an inquiry into sort of 30 years after the joint declaration. And of course you hear the Beijing government really blasting them on it and saying they're intermeddling, and then the British government say, well, I have a legitimate concern because I'm a signatory to the joint declaration, so on and so forth. And of course, at the same time, what we had was the Foreign Office from the UK government reacting to the MPC decision. And when I saw that statement from the Foreign Office, I got so the verb I was trying to avoid was starting with a P. Anyway, I got so upset.
You can say it on this show.
Oh, well, I got so upset.
We'll beep you out if you want. That's okay.
Yeah. I then issued a statement in my own Facebook and also gone public on that, saying that, well, the former Hong Kong governor, Chris Patten, just wrote an article in, I think it was Financial Times, wasn't it, when he said that, Britain has the duty, and I think the word he used was Britain was honor bound to speak up for Hong Kong. And I said if the Foreign Office statement was what they thought was doing the honourable thing, then it would be far more honourable for them not to have spoken at all. Because when you think of these foreign governments who are bending over backwards, queuing up to do business with the mainland, do you really rely on them to speak up for Hong Kong or to use the word intermeddle in Hong Kong? I mean, you must be naive to think that foreign governments would speak up for Hong Kong.
We think it's just a political tool used by the pro-establishment because if the UK actually cared about Hong Kong's the people's future, I think we should have been given a choice, like Scotland just recently was. Do you want to stay? Do you want to go? What do you want to do? We didn't receive it in 1984. We didn't receive it in 1989, which I think was more important. But why would any government
want to speak up for Hong Kong?
Speak up for
when there are so many goodies doing business with the Chinese government.
Exactly.
And
especially,
be sensible and practical about it.
There is absolutely no chance you will now hear any of the Western governments criticize China over this dot on a map anymore.
Dot on a map, right.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Because
which we call our home.
Which are our home, but to them it's just, money bags, right? We're just a cash cow to be milked. And that's how I see it, because they use Hong Kong as let's say an entreport for a lot of things, including money laundering. But they need Hong Kong for that. And why would you ruffle the feathers of something that you desperately need?
Yeah. The other aspect, as I mentioned, was question of colluding with foreign governments or foreign forces. I mean, the pan-democrats have always been accused of colluding with foreign forces. And my reply, again, is very, very simple. Come on, be practical. I mean, who wants to collude with you? You need to have certain abilities and capabilities and resources before people would collude with you. I said, you need certain status to be a spy. I mean, you can only commit treason if you have got certain powers. I mean, talk about any pan-democrat. I mean, what ability do they have to sell out the country? You can't call people to arms. You can't do anything to affect the territorial integrity. You don't have any military secret or economic secrets or government secrets or to sell. So why should any foreign government collude with you, right?
Well, I'll tell you this. Expect the pan-democrats to next be accused as Japanese agents, since that's the biggest turmoil that China's having right now is with the Japanese. That's going to be the next thing. Oh, okay, we understand you're not with the West. Now you must be with Japan or Taiwan
But what can you give the Japanese government, and what would the Japanese government want from you, right? I mean, unless you've got that sort of ability, no foreign government is going to collude with you.
Exactly.
I mean, we're not even. What's the name of this guy? Snowden. Snowden has got some national secrets.
Sure.
Then maybe you can. If he wants, maybe he could have traded with some foreign governments. I'm not accusing him of having done that, but maybe he has the ability to do so. But pan-democrats are always at the other end. They're always the victims of being hacked into. So, what ability does any pan-democrat have to trade with any government? So why should any government collude with you, right?
It's like I said, it's just a political tool used by the pro-establishment. Dealing with Siwa Leung, the Civic Party and other pan-Democrats. Why is he so difficult to deal with compared to C.H. Tung or Donald Tsang? Because I did not see this kind of tension and just mistrust between the legislative and executive branches.
Well, I think even before C.Y. Leung was elected chief executive by the election committee, generally people don't trust him. I mean, his nickname, of course, was Wolf.
Yes.
And so in a way, you can see that people more or less knew his personality even before he was chief executive. And he really had very few friends, because even amongst the not just the pan-Democrats, even among the pro-establishment, even DAB don't really like him. And it's just the type of person he is. He doesn't have many friends.
So it's not really a politician. Because a politician would know how to give and take, how to have you can't really have a harmonious relationship, but at least have an outreach.
I think there is one thing he's very good at: making enemies. Yeah.
Isn't his if you had to define his job, his singular responsibility is to act as the liaison person between the Chinese Communist Party and Hong Kong. That's his job, right? He is the liaison person. Do you not think that in that sense, the number one on his job description, he's failed spectacularly at doing that?
Well, he relies on the China Liaison Office to do that. You remember when he was, just after he was elected, he paid 3 visits, and one of them was to the China Liaison Office?
Yes, on the same day he was elected, wasn't it?
Yeah, and that was for the longest time as well, compared to the visits he paid to the LegCo president. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So Zheng Xiaoming really runs the city, not C.Y. Leung?
Well,
I just don't,
debatable.
I just don't think the guy has got political skills. Whether you support him or you don't support him, whether you're a pan-dem or a pro-establishment politician, he does not have political skills. He does not know what to do politically. That's what it comes across to me. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, I think the liaison office actually does that job for him, because the liaison office actually try to settle disputes between the pro-establishment forces. Yeah, and of course they have the ability to do so as well, because they can always trade with whatever. I know, for example, there is this talk that they help people to borrow loans. So you can see how the China Liaison Office holds a lot of influence, and they have this united front policy as well. So they can help people to get elected. They can help legislator hopefuls to get elected and become a legislator, because they have lots of connections with some, district organizations and so on. And so when it comes to election time, they can tell people who to vote for. And that's why you see that there are very many pro-establishment candidates who've got to pay their respects to the China Liaison Office. And that, in a way, that's why you see C.Y. Leung has to pay his, courtesy call. One of the first visits he paid after his election was to the China Liaison Office.
And do you think they're feeling frustrated with him?
Well, what I hear is that every time there are contacts from up north who wants to find out, what Hong Kong people are feeling and how they are reacting, the constant complaint from everybody, including from the pro-establishment camp, was what a terrible chief executive C.Y. Leung
because we even seeing people like James Tian come out and say, hey, will you resign? I mean, in LegCo, he said, will you resign if this proposal doesn't pass? And of course, with a smile, he says, no. But it's not just him. It seems that other people are getting frustrated, like you said. But I've never seen an outright open question like that in LegCo. I think that's really telling.
Well, but of course,
but they'll still support him.
when they're told to toe the line, they will still toe the line.
Exactly. We know that the big finance companies and banks will support whatever China wants them to support because, like I said, big business is being done in China, so why ruffle feathers? But 90% of businesses in Hong Kong are actually SMEs. Has there been a lobbying effort to get their support on to not supporting this package by the Pan Democrats? Has that actually been explored?
Well, when the Pan Democrats try to influence the public, they would do it through the most of the avenues that we already have. But the SMEs in particular are not really very keen to be seen to be associating with any political organization.
So they'd rather have the status quo.
I think, I'm not so sure they would rather have the status quo. I think what they try to do is to be apolitical. They try to say, well, we're not interested in politics and we're only interested in business as usual.
But apathy has got us to this position that we're in, and it's only going to get worse.
Yeah, I think apathy is not really a way out, because when you are faced with a mighty power, a naked power who is not afraid to do anything against the will of the people, if you succumb, it only gets worse. If you retreat, you will only be pushed even further backwards. So you've got to stand your ground. I mean, in a way, people always talk about Occupy Central and say, well, why are you still doing it? Why do you want to do it? Because it's not going to work. Beijing is decided and is determined, and it's not going to cave in just because you occupy the Central District. But sometimes the test is not really whether something is useful, simpliciter, but whether, when it comes to principles, there are certain principles that you just have to stand your ground and cannot give in. And you have to express your clear determination, because otherwise, if you get pushed back, you just go down a slippery slope and you will never come back.
Will you participate in Occupy Central?
Yes.
So it's a way of saying, I'm here, I'm still going to be here, and I will be here next time. Don't forget me. That's the main reason for doing it.
Well, and also I think one country, two systems is really up to Hong Kong people, because otherwise it's going to be one country, one system. I mean, by now I think Hong Kong people should realize that. Don't kid ourselves. I mean, you think that the Communist Party, having promised one country, two systems, is really going to give you two systems unless you stand your ground and say, well, rule of law is important to me. Judges have got to be true to the rule of law and not just being patriotic as you want it. You have to stand your ground on things like preservation of the Cantonese language and the way we write our characters, our culture. We're very civilized in queuing up. We don't spit. Our kids don't poo in the streets. We have values that we treasure, and we are not going to be run over by, people who think that we can be just pushed aside. So, I mean, it comes a time when you have to say enough is enough. And I think, in a way, after this MPC decision, Hong Kong people have got to realize that it's really up to Hong Kong people. Any government would need the cooperation of the people, and civil disobedience or non-cooperation is something, in a peaceful and non-violent manner, is something the Hong Kong people will have to get used to in future.
You just mentioned about how Hong Kong culture is, in my opinion as well, being attacked. But then you have people like Elsie Leung coming out and saying, if we were a municipality, we would have more candidate choices. I mean, did she just have a Freudian slip? Is that what they really want?
Well, I think to consider her, you have to also consider that she used to be our Secretary for Justice. I mean, and the basic law is very clear. I mean, she should know the basic law. I mean, it's one country, two systems. We are an SAR, Special Administrative Zone. And then region, sorry. And then suddenly, I mean, here comes Elsie Leung and said, you get more choices if you are not an SAR and you're something else. I mean,
we are an SAR. It's like saying if I were a woman, I'd have more choices, right?
In a way, you scratch your head and say, what exactly is she talking about? And where is the logic? I mean, why is it that if we're not an SAR, we will have a better right? I mean, show me another city in the mainland which has better rights or higher right or more choices because it's not an SAR.
Right.
I mean, what kind of logic is she talking about?
We mentioned that in our earlier segment that they're trying to recreate Hong Kong and Shanghai, and it's failing spectacularly with their free trade zone, where they're supposed to have more, economic freedom, maybe dabble in some stronger commercial law and stuff like that. But it shows you cannot recreate something special like Hong Kong, and hopefully they're learning their lesson that way and not to dilute Hong Kong.
I think to qualify this a bit, it's not so much you can't recreate Hong Kong. It's really a city lives and becomes what it is based on its systems. I mean, they try to create Shanghai like Hong Kong, but they haven't got the infrastructure and the system and all the procedures and the due process.
Right.
So I remember years and years and years ago when I was with the Consumer Council, I went together with the Consumer Council and visited the mainland. And when I looked at the laws, for consumer protection, at that time, being so naive, I was so amazed. And I said, wow, I mean, your laws, they're so well written. The sort of protection they give to the consumers. Wow, much better than the consumer laws that we are able to pass in Hong Kong. How can you do that? How are you able to do that? And of course, years later, I realized that, they all have nicely written laws on paper, but it only exists on paper.
Right, like the Constitution promises freedom of speech and assembly.
But it's not justiciable. I mean, and the same thing, when they want to create a free trade zone in the Shanghai. Maybe it's so well written. They've got all these things. It's like empty promises, like universal suffrage, which they've written into the basic law. And of course, it's not real. It's just on paper. So that's why they can't recreate a Hong Kong, because it's not for real. Right. If you mean what you say you have written down, then of course you can always recreate Hong Kong. Shanghai can be a better Hong Kong. If only it's allowed to get rid of some of the strictures of the Communist Party.
If it had the Hong Kong legal system.
If it's got the freedom, if it's got the liberties, and it can allow individual initiatives and things of that sort. Of course, Shanghai people are actually very smart people.
Switching gears a little bit, Hong Kong's state of English is it's improved a little since they stopped the mother tongue initiative, but it's still quite poor. Do you think that was deliberate? Because if Hong Kong culture is being attacked, English is part of Hong Kong culture. We're the only we're the only city in China that has English as an official language, which is an international language, and until that changes, that's how it's going to stay. And it seems that they're trying to water it down from media, because English radio is not supported by the government at all. The TV stations, you see ATV World now from what it was even 10 years ago. It's night and day difference. And now it's completely unwatchable. It really is.
It's completely unwatchable for many reasons.
Well, the news, other than their main news, there's nothing else.
Language is one of them. Just one of them. Some programs, even though they have good English, I'm not watching.
I only watch the main news. That's it. But do you think it was a deliberate attempt to water down Hong Kong as part of their cultural, I call it cultural cleansing, but nobody wants to say that,
Well,
or do you think it was just bumbling idiots that didn't know what they were doing?
I think that maybe I wouldn't put that necessarily as a deliberate attempt to weaken Hong Kong's people's ability in English. I think it may be all sorts of things. It may be that because, now Hong Kong people have to learn Putonghua, then you have less time for the English language. Also because in the old days, you have to get anywhere, you have to really have good English. You have to get into English schools, and education at that time was not really for the general masses, and therefore you basically have the elitist sort of system. But now you reach the general masses, and to a certain extent, maybe English is when you hear the English on television, you reach the general masses as well. But I must say, when you speak to really top quality people, their English is very, very good. And the Chinese is also very, very good. Recently, the university students are organizing these class boycotts, and I was looking at some of the declarations they've written in Chinese, and I said, wow, Chinese is so good, and when you speak to top university students, their English is much better than mine. So I think it really depends, on who you're looking at and who you're speaking to.
All right. And final question: will you run for LegCo in 2016?
Well, I think politics is really for the younger. And when I founded the Civic Party in 2006, I said that the main reason was I wanted democracy movement to have, new generations, new waves, and so on. So when you notice that right after we founded the Civic Party, the first legislative election was 2008, and I ran second in the ticket to Tanya.
Yep.
And then 2012, I ran second in the ticket to Kwok Kake. And so, I saw my role as helping younger people to get elected, and I think you need impetus and energy. I have not decided what I'm going to do with the next election, but I think I'll still be around in politics. And I'm also very, very pleased and very proud to see lots of young people now very interested in politics. All those representatives from the students' unions and from the various universities who are now in the forefront of the class boycott movement. I think they're all of them are really great. I have great admirations for them. And so I think Hong Kong should have a good future. They just need more support from the general masses, I think.
So our guest has been Audrey Eu, the chairwoman of the Civic Party. You can get more information on audreyu.hk. You can also go to civicparty.hk. And of course, their Facebook page, facebook.com/audrey.eu.
Very good.
But best is just to search it and type in Audrey Eu. She is the top search result. Thank you so much for being on the show.
Oh, it's lovely to be here.
Thank you very much, Audrey.
Thank you.
And welcome back to the final segment of Eye on Hong Kong. We have to end the show by giving our Shame on You award. Lee, who do you nominate?
I nominate Elsie Leung.
Why?
Because she has the audacity to treat 7 million people who are well-educated, intelligent, well-read, as though we are a complete bunch of morons.
And I nominate Andrew Lee because I found his comments, well, like you said, they are arguable, a bit crass, but at the same time, you're a former education minister. I don't think this is something you should be saying.
Maybe not, but he crafted it in a well-crafted way. It's a debatable point. It was something that you could disagree with, certainly, because you do disagree with him, but nevertheless it was done in a way that was moderately intelligent, and it could be used as the basis for a debating competition. Elsie Leung's comment is so absurd, it is actually quite patronising and condescending too.
It's that Red Guard comment that really hits my nerve, because I've read about the Cultural Revolution. It was horrible.
And it really is just about time that the woman just shut up and retired.
And I really wish people would stop comparing these students to the Red Guard, because the stuff the Red Guard did is a million times worse than anything that these students are doing. You don't see them putting dunce caps on people's heads, or you don't see them bringing them out to Hong Kong Stadium and shaming them in the middle and sometimes beating them to death. But yeah, I will agree with you, actually. I find Elsie Leung to really treat Hong Kongers like they have barely a primary six education.
Yes.
It's, I mean, come on. Stop. Close your mouth. That's basically.
Stop patronising intelligent people.
Exactly.
Go away. Go and retire. You've got a nice place in the MPC. Go and enjoy your pension. Go and enjoy the limelight. Hurry up and retire and get out.
So, Elsie Leung, you have just received the
Shame on you.
award. And like I said in the last show, one of these days I'm going to print these up and send it to them by registered mail, so I know they received it.
Good idea.
And that's the end of the show. We'll be back next week, and hopefully Key got his phone, and he can show it off on the next episode. And thank you, Lee, for sitting in for him.
Sure, no problem.
It was wonderful. And that's the end of the show. Goodbye.
Bye-bye.